All right, today we're going to talk about the increasing popularity of leaving the United States. And there's two ways you can do it. You can leave and get a passport residency and be a dual citizen, and some people expat. And it's my understanding that if you have $2 million or more, that they charge you for denouncing your American citizenship. And to me, that just doesn't sit right. It's almost like they're putting a price for your freedom, which, if there's a price for your freedom, that would mean that you're not free. But let's talk about the history. So a lot of people fled Nazi Germany. I know several older people, some of them passed on, that fled Europe because they were Jewish. People got out of Venezuela, when the food crisis hit. If they had a means to leave, they did it. Okay, so it's not a new thing here, but you have to see the writing on the wall, and you have to put aside all your biases, because as an American, you've been told all your life it's the greatest country in the world. There's no, and a lot of that's true, don't get me wrong. However, we are on the decline, and national debt, the inflation, middle class is disappearing. There's no doubt we're on the incline. So let's discuss some of the reasons why people would leave. The quality of food here. I've ran across some studies about how, Europe bans GMO, at least some of Europe bans GMO, which is short for genetically modified organisms. And it's a genetically modified plant. Okay, so there's health aspects. I won't get into that. And there's other food additives, colorings, that are banned in other countries because they're not good for you. But unfortunately, in the United States, we take profit over people. So, the people are getting rich at the expense of the health when it comes to food, which will cover health care costs shortly. You got pesticides, fertilizers. Hey, I've got a garden. I may show it. And I don't use fertilizers. I don't use pesticides, and I haven't had a problem. I've heard of people having problems. I've been doing it, 6 or 7 years. I'm going to expand it this year due to inflation, and it's better food. We also have a problem with the farmlands disappearing. They'll take good, high quality farmland, and that not all land is farmland. So you're looking at the topsoil, and some of these places they're putting housing on is, prime farmland. And in my opinion, it should be illegal to do so. Again, profits over people. And at the same time, historically, the population of the United States is growing. So do the math. Less farmland, more population, less farmland. Answer, GMO. Okay, they say, and I'm not even convinced that you actually get more yield. And so what if you do? Just grow more plants, quit taking the farmland, and we'd all be better off for it. You might make less money, but if you're going to grow food as a farmer, that's something to be proud of. It's hard work. And along with that pride should be the pride of putting the best product on the table for the best price. So I understand you have to make a living. Anyway, this is a great segue into the healthcare system. So healthcare, it varies. Healthcare insurance. So health insurance varies. The cost of health insurance varies, but it's general consensus that the deductibles went way up, and so did the prices. And this, I'm old enough to remember, I wasn't driving yet, in the 70s, car insurance went up. And I would listen to people talk, because we hung out with adults when we were out. We were in Ohio, out in the country. There really wasn't a whole lot of kids around. There were a few, but, hung out with adults. Okay, so I remember them talking about the cost of health car insurance. Actually said to myself that, actually told to my wife too, that this Affordable Care Act, making it mandatory to have health insurance, is going to drive the price way up higher. Now, come on, really? Anyone know history didn't know this was going to happen? They said it wouldn't happen. They said it'd be a good thing. And I guess for the people that don't have money, it is a good thing. But that is at the expense of other people. I think that's another discussion for another time. But you've got expensive therapies, insufficiencies driving costs upward, and you've got families or people that have to choose between going to the doctor, paying rent, going to the doctor, buying food, and if they're a parent, going to the doctor, paying rent for you and your children, going to the doctor, paying rent for buying food for you and your children, and the cost of pharmaceuticals as well. I was doing a study back in 2016 when they started getting the fine. No, that wasn't a fine, folks. Anytime money goes to the IRS, it's a tax. Okay, so you got taxed for not having it. And they're pretty smart on that, because the IRS can garnish you. They can take your income tax return, they can garnish your check if you rack up the fees that supposedly fees that used to occur for not having health insurance. So I was keeping track of my money back then. I'm not as good as I do now, but I was. And I talked to my wife, and she's from the Philippines, and she was here only a couple of years since then. In 2016. So I said, look, we can pay this fine, and we did with our taxes. We can pay it next year, but I can't remember. I said by the third or fourth year, this is going to eliminate what we currently are savings. And in other words, if our savings per year stayed the same and the fine kept doubling every year, eventually we would not be able to save any money at all. And being that she's from the Philippines, we started talking about leaving, because if I can't save any money here, back then the minimum wage in the Philippines is $10 a day, but that's a livable wage. So do the math again. If you take any amount of money down there, you can live for quite a while, a lot cheaper, even if prices double. So also, I went to the doctor in 2019, I think it was, and maybe it was 2018. Anyway, it was right before the news of the pandemic came out, and called around because I wanted to save money, and I went about 40 minutes away. They quoted me $65, which they didn't do anything for me. They said if I would have came in when I first got sick. So anyway, given my insurance card at this time, I did have insurance. Okay, and it was through an employer. Still have it. My wife actually it's through her job, and they sent me out the door, and then they sent me a bill for $100. So I called them and said, look, you quoted me $65 and blah blah blah. I said, would you take $65 because that's what you quoted me? She said, sure. So immediately I made the 40-minute drive down there, 40-minute back, and I took a check of $65 with me. Lo and behold, I get a bill for $35. Well, I send the bill along with a handwritten note explaining the situation, and told them it's not too late to do the right thing. All you got to do is rip this check up, because that's what you quoted me. And they cashed the check. So that is affordable healthcare at work. Got insurance, pay more. So now there's the something to talk about is the inflation and the eroding purchasing power of our dollar. Now they have what they call trueflation. I haven't really looked at it. Trueflation for me is what I buy, because so my truth is not your truth. Trueflation is the things that I buy. So the true inflation of the things I buy are the things that affect the bottom line of my budget, or of my I don't call it a budget. So anyway, it does affect, that's how much more I'm paying. Then on top of that, we're having a disappearing of the middle class. Now I don't know how to put it. I mean, by some standards, we've been lower class paid, got a high class attitude, but we don't have a high class budget. And that's how we were actually able to save money. But anyway, the disappearing middle class is happening, and we've always been on a lower budget. Or you can say we're upper lower class or bottom middle class, take your pick, whatever sounds better. And that's actually what makes our journey pretty special, because what we have accomplished, I mean, it's not great, and a lot of people I know have done a lot better dollar wise, but percentage wise, man, we're hard to beat. And first thing I had to realize is you start here. These are the cards in your hand. Okay, so if you have $20 left over in a month and you see where you can cut some money, you save it, and that's all. You better save it. I mean, and then invest it. Man, I'm paying twice as much for goods and services, sometimes more. Lumber went up 400% during the pandemic. I think it came down a little bit. Don't have the statistics. I do know it's a lot higher. Food has gone sometimes double, sometimes not as much. And shrinkflation as well. A lot of that stuff I don't buy. We try to stay away from processed food. But the problem is that if you were retired in 2019, 2020, and you had just enough money, you were on a tight budget, you were okay, man, you are now either strapped for cash, or you're looking for a job, or you're working. Now, on the other hand, if you were in the United States, 2019 and 2020, and all this inflation hit, and you're strapped for cash, Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, Panama, Peru, Ecuador, maybe even Colombia, Paraguay. All these places you can live a lot cheaper, and you'd have more disposable income, and your worries would be over as long as you didn't get that lifestyle increase, because you had more money, you're going to spend some more money. There's a lot more to living in a different country than just that, which maybe I'll make a video about it. I've traveled abroad, and my wife is from the Philippines. I have family in Central America. So there's another thing, is child care. Okay, and I would say if you can't afford a child, don't have one. The thing is, you get a lot of government help, but babies are expensive. It takes child care is so expensive, and if you have a lot of kids, you are actually losing money if you take a job and hire daycare or hire a babysitter, and you got to be careful who you hire as a babysitter. So this makes life a little bit rougher, and it shouldn't be that way, but it is. So having a child care cost, not to mention doctors, and that's really a financial change. So you really have to tighten up. At the same time, you got to provide for your family. So once again, I think that if you can't afford it, it's better to have a child and be able to be self-paid. If you get hooked on government assistance, it may be hard to get off, because once you leave, you are making a little bit more, but putting a lot more effort into it. So I can understand that. And another thing is the housing crisis. I mean, look, owning your own home was the cornerstone of the American dream. You know, back when I was back in the late 60s, I remember my dad worked, my mom didn't. You know, we had a house, we had a car, we had a horse, we had a farm, we had a garage, we had a barn. Okay. We grew some food in the garden. That was cool. I don't know much about bills. I was a kid, but one income took care of all that. So today it takes two. But I did do a study. If you see my video, wages versus housing, you'll see that and I went by minimum wage because it's hard to tell what people made, but they made at least that. And back in the 70s, it only took 9.2 years or 9.3 years, something like that, to buy a house at minimum wage gross at 40 hours a week. That's a lot, but on a 30-year note, which I don't recommend, by the way, on a 30-year note, that's about a third, not counting interest. But if you could save it in 9 years, and if you started working, especially if you started working at 16, maybe not full time, but if you're able to save all your money, you know, you can get your house before you're 30, have it paid for, pay cash, no interest. That's always the best way to do it. Hard way. But talk more about that later. But the housing's doubled. Okay, now we got lucky. We bought a house. Actually, it was a mobile home. Got to play the cards in your hand, but we paid cash for it, and we never would have had the cash had we not saved. And I've heard it said, and I prescribe to the point of view that they say luck is being prepared when the opportunity comes. So we saved our money and we got it, and we got it cheap. And that was a major break for us. And that's part of our story. And that's, you know, like I said, upper, lower class, lower middle class, take your pick. But we beat the odds. Not only once, we bought a second one. And we sold the first one. Anyway, so there's talk about it. I don't know if it actually has come about, but they're talking about the solution being 50-year mortgage. Great. Okay, so the interest piled up on 50 years as opposed to 30 years. Great interest. Okay, so more money out of your pocket, but you can have it now. Okay, so if you're 20 and buy a house, it's not many 20-year-olds do, you will be paying that mortgage until you're 70. Okay, so that makes you a lifelong debtor, and I'm an advocate for being debt-free. There is good debt, but, you know, debt-free is sure glad I am now with all this inflation. So you want to be 50-year mortgage. You're going to be a lifelong debtor, and you're going to be working. So you're a lifelong taxpayer. Now, I believe that working with all this taxes, which are a lot higher actually during the American Revolution that we fought the British over. Anyway, so you don't want to be a debt slave, and you don't want to be a slave to your job. Actually, I think a job, you should save money, get some cash flow, or have a business that you can make money at. Because, and even a business is a job, but you know, if you can get cash flow, that's always a good way to do. Jobs should be a stepping stone, and it should be something hard to do to get to a better place. And unfortunately in America, times are changing, but me growing up, you know, being born in the 60s, you go to work, spend all your money, go to work, spend all your money, have a hard time, that's fine. deal with it, go to work, get some more money, get over the hard times, spend it all, spend it all. And that's what I did for most of my life. And that was a big mistake. So I did get it together, and what we accomplished in just over even a decade, what we accomplished was fantastic. We got some breaks. I may tell that story, but along with increased housing price comes increased rent price. So even not owning a house is going to cost you. It's a sad reality that this is becoming unreachable. Now let's talk about student debt. I listen to Dave Ramsey a lot. I don't listen as much as I used to, but I listen to a lot of Dave Ramsey. And a lot of those people that call in have student debt. Okay. So you get out of college, you're in debt. You have to have a car to get to a job. You have to have a job to get paid for the debt and the car. And it's a vicious circle. So you're accustomed to debt. And I've seen it. I've seen lifelong debtors, people that made great money. And it's like they've got this, they got two nice cars, nice home, trips, just spending money like the government. And yeah, that works, and it does work. It's a great time, you get reward for that. You go take a trip to Europe, it's rewarding, okay, especially you can afford it. And saving money is unfortunately just not sexy. And a lot of people don't know. My parents didn't know. I started my journey about learning Financial Basics 101 and moved up from there online because I had to do something. So then we get to the banks that control the debt. Now there's been, as of March of 2026, $1.28 trillion of debt. And this is a record. They made a big deal out of it when it hit 1 trillion. Now it's up 28% of that, right? The defaults are higher too. And I hear a lot of stories about people putting their groceries on a debit card, and that's a dangerous place. Tells me that when their debit card reaches the limit, they may not have any groceries, and they're going to be spending their cash for groceries and defaulting on that. Now, the banks have a bank bail-in. So bank bail-ins, I don't think they'd make such a law. Legally, all right, so bank bail-ins, they can legally take your money if they have a problem. So these are unsecured debtors, so that savings, checkings, CDs, mutual funds, they can take this to stay afloat if they have problems. Now, they may give you some stock instead. And this is not cool because you're getting stock in a bank that's going under. Okay, so they can sit there and say, no, we're not going to give it to you. I recommend having more than one bank and some cash, even though you won't get any interest on it. But do you really think that they'd make such a law if they never planned on using it? It's diabolical, is what it is. Now, the bank bailouts that have happened. So the government gives the bank money. The government gets it from us. Where do you think they got that money? It's our tax dollars at work. Too big to fail. Too big, you can't fail or it's going to cause a problem. Well, do something about that. They had did a lot of high risk investments. Market was great. High risk investments, it pays off until it doesn't. Okay, so there is no incentive for the banks to tighten the reins on their investments and their risk tolerance if they're going to get bailed out. I mean, you have these companies that were having problems, they're bailed out, yet their CEOs get $1 million, $1 million a year pensions. So that's kind of wrong. So what do you think is going to happen when the banks get in trouble? another thing that has happened in 1971, Nixon took us off the gold standard. So the United States dollar is backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. That is to say, the United States government doesn't seem to be able to balance their budget. Yes, full faith and credit. And then you have the repo market. I think it was like 2018, 2019. And the repo market is, and then I think they changed it a little bit, but they were supposed to have so many reserves on hand to cover deposits. So when people came to their bank and wanted to get some cash, they would have it. So they would borrow money, but the interest rate was like 10% for an overnight loan. So the Fed stepped in. They said it'd be for a month and then say to the end of the year. And I think they're still doing it. And that spells trouble. So you got banks that are in trouble. You have banks that close. You have the bank bail-in. So I just don't like the way this looks. I don't like the way it's heading. And I would say it's just a matter of time. And this is going to affect every American. Now we're going to talk about BRICS, which is an acronym short for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. However, many other countries have joined. And Russia and China are trading in something other than dollars. And the dollar was the de facto standard for international trade. And part of what happened in 1971 is that they made it, anyone who bought oil from, I think, OPEC and Saudi Arabia had to pay in dollars. Okay, and this kept the dollar alive. So when you get these other countries trading in something other than the dollar, and apparently they want to circumvent the dollar, over half the dollars printed are outside the United States. And when these dollars come home, it's quite possible you're going to have more dollars chasing the same or less goods. So this can be a problem. Also, the countries that BRICS invites to join are resource-rich countries. So you have these resource-rich countries. You have inflation heating up. The resources are, increasing in value. You're circumventing the dollar, kind of, I would say screwing the United States, but that's actually not totally true. The United States has been a bully with the dollar, and they weaponized the dollar more than once. One recent one is that with the SWIFT system, which transfers money internationally, they kicked Russia off of. And that's a message to other countries too. So it's kind of like play by our rules, or, well, the BRICS gets together and say, hey, guess what? We're going to make our own rules. And I really can't blame them. So, but this is the reality of happens, whether you're, and do I think BRICS is going to hurt the United States? Yes. I don't think it's going to be good for the United States. And Russia and China has also been stockpiling gold. So usually gold has been an asset during economic uncertainty. So the increased value of gold kind of indicates economic uncertainty. So add that to the mix. But also, if you create a new currency that's backed by gold, which currency do you want? You can have this currency here backed by gold, or you can have this currency here backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. So that would lead to, speaking of the full faith and credit, let's talk about the national debt. If this doesn't give you faith in the government, nothing will. National debt hit over $39 trillion. It was just a couple decades ago, just $1 trillion. The interest on it alone is more than the military budget. This is a problem. Because it's a problem because one of these years, the money coming in if it hasn't happened already, is not going to be enough, not even to pay the interest rate. So imagine this: you have a credit card, you're making your monthly payments, and then something happens, you buy more, and then you can't afford your minimum monthly payments. You're insolvent. What happens if the United States goes insolvent? And there's a lot of speculation out there. This video is not about this. This video is why some people might live outside of the United States. The United States goes insolvent, I'm sure that they're going to be happy with their decisions. So this is just totally unsustainable, basically. And then you have overreach of the government. You got greater government intervention in businesses that make it harder. You got social programs that are expanding, just eating up tax dollars that could go towards the budget. Where do you think they're going to get that money? You know, they're looking at us. They're looking at you, worker. Pay more taxes. And on top of higher taxes and inflation and doctors and the cost of housing, tell you what, this is turning into a third world country. That's what it's like. You go to work, you get enough money to barely get by. People are happier, but they're happier because they let go of all the worldly possessions. Ding, ding, ding. If you want to be happy, cut those ties. I am somewhat of a minimalist, not to the extreme. I'm happier, have more money for it. So, bottom line is the American dream's on life support, man. And a lot of people are predicting more of an economic downturn, and some even indicate that there might be a Great Depression, and there's a lot of parallels between now and the Great Depression. There's a few videos out there. I may do one, I don't know. A lot of studying that. But the debt levels, not to mention that we had a AAA debt rating or credit rating, AAA credit rating, and we've been downgraded to AA. So again, if you look at the government like a person, that person is kind of took a hit on their credibility. And then lastly, now my kids are grown. I do have grandchildren, and it's a concern. And some people leave the United States because they don't like the fact that their children go to school and they have a drill. Back in the 60s, man, we had a drill where we'd all get over under our desk and put our head between our legs, probably kiss her goodbye, in case of a nuclear attack, right? Because you had the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I guess there were missiles pointed at us right from nukes pointed at us from Cuba. So this is a reality for sure. So your kid goes to school, talks about the active shooter drill that you have, and I work at a place. My wife worked at a place where they have she has had active shooter drills. We just have a poster. It tells you run, hide, and last fight. Now, this is where it's opinion. I'm for the Second Amendment. And I think that if 50% of the people in Walmart carried a gun, people would think twice before walking into Walmart and opening fire. If 50% of the people in the church carried a gun, people would think twice before walking in the church and opening fire. Schools, teachers, maybe. I mean, you got to go by training for one. Two, common sense. There are some people that shouldn't have guns because they have no common sense. So the thing is that unless you're on a suicide mission, you just wouldn't put yourself into that position. You think you're going to come in there and, and if you are on a suicide mission with the Second Amendment gun toters and you started opening fire, someone's going to shoot you and less people will die. So that's where I stand on that. Thank you for watching, and please like, subscribe, and comment below.